Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into something murky. Picture this. A dimly lit wooden bathhouse, the air thick with steam and the scent of old herbs, wet wood, and something vaguely resembling boiled cabbage. You step through a crooked doorway into what should be a sanctuary of cleansing and calm. And instead, you're met with a cacophony of splashes, gossip, and someone loudly scrubbing what looks suspiciously like a goat hoof. You're not here for a spa day. You're here to survive what they called bathing in the Middle Ages. And spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't make it past the foot wash basin. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where and when you're listening from. Always curious to know which time zones my fellow sleepy historians are coming from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a hesitant step forward, your boots squelching on damp straw, scattered across the floor in what you assume is a medieval attempt at hygiene. The walls sweat with condensation. Somewhere in the corner, someone is humming a Gregorian chant off-key. A woman dumps a bucket of water into a large communal tub with a splash that soaks your leggings instantly. Welcome to the public bathhouse. Your public bathhouse, because you'll be returning here. Often, whether you like it or not. Despite the name, there's very little that's private about this place. You're elbow to elbow with people from all walks of life. Blacksmiths, bakers, beggars, barons sometimes. And one man who swears he's a retired crusader but smells like he's still rotting on the battlefield. The bathhouse, or stew as they called it, yes, that's real, is less day spa and more medieval soup pot with legs. Water is heated in great cauldrons and dumped into wooden tubs, where it will be reused for as many paying customers as will fit. You'd think the steam would be the grossest part, but no. The steam is the least of your concerns. You dip your fingers into the bath cautiously. It's warm. That's good, but it's also oily. Skin flakes swirl lazily around the surface like medieval seasoning. There are flower petals floating in the mix, which seems romantic until you realize they're not for scent, but to mask the grayish tint of the water. You're told to undress. Everyone does. You glance around nervously, but modesty is for people who don't have lice, and everyone here does. Even the mayor. You shed your tunic, trying not to make eye contact with the toothless man now rubbing his back with what looks like a dried-out loofah, or maybe a pine cone. Someone offers to scrub your shoulders. You politely decline and lower yourself into the tub, which makes a sound not unlike soup bubbling over. It is warm, but also gritty. Something brushes your leg. You pray it's a stray leaf and not a medieval toe. You're not lucky. And then you remember, this is only the first round. There will be 3. Soak, scrub, and rinse. That's the tradition. Except the rinse is just someone throwing cold water on you from a bucket that probably also served as a chamber pot last week. There's no separate plumbing, no filtration system, no water change between guests. Just one long human marinade. Oddly enough, people love this place. They laugh, they chat, they make business deals. This is the medieval Starbucks. If you look closely, in the back corner, 2 monks are negotiating over parchment while steam curls their beards. A woman nearby offers you soap, which looks like a lump of grey cheese. You sniff it. Bad idea. It's lye and pig fat, possibly mixed with a little sand. You lather up anyway, hoping to scrub away the shame of being in bathwater that already hosted 12 strangers. And then there's the noise. No gentle ambient music here. Instead, the bathhouse echoes with a symphony of coughs, belches, and the occasional shout of, "Who took my towel?" You begin to feel lightheaded. Not from relaxation, but because the air is so thick with humidity and old sweat, it might actually be displacing oxygen. You want to leave, but no one does after just one soak. That would be rude. Plus, it took you a week to save enough for this experience, and you'll be lucky if you can afford it again before the next lunar eclipse. Eventually, you climb out of the tub, dripping with regret. You dry yourself with a linen cloth someone hands you. It's damp. It's always damp. You try not to think about who used it before you. Hint. It was everyone. You dress in silence. Everyone smells slightly better, but only by medieval standards. Which is to say, you now smell like hot vinegar and wet wool instead of fermented onions and stable muck. Progress. Stepping outside, the cold night air hits your skin. You breathe in. The open street, filled with dung and smoke, still smells cleaner than where you just came from. And yet, people come back. You'll come back. Maybe not for the cleanliness, but for the ritual, for the gossip, for the fleeting moment when you feel just maybe slightly less like a walking compost heap. The historians still argue about how often people really bathed in the Middle Ages. Some claim once a week, others once a season. Some suggest only on holy days. What we do know is this: the idea of being truly clean, by modern standards, was foreign. And that bath you just had, that was luxury. Sleepy yet? Good. Because we're just getting started. Tomorrow we'll find out what happens when the soap itself turns against you. You wake up groggy the next morning. Your skin still slightly wrinkled from last night's soak. Let's not call it a bath. That's far too generous. Your clothes, which you carefully laid over a wooden stool to air out, now smell like steamed onions and regret. You scratch at your neck absently. Was that lye soap or medieval exfoliation via mild chemical burn? Either way, today's adventure begins not with a splash, but with a hunk of something you're told is soap. You hold it in your palm. It's rough, crumbly. Smells like firewood, stale ale, and ash. Oh no, friend. That's not artisanal charcoal. That's real ash. From wood and bones, if you're in a fancy part of town. Soap in the Middle Ages wasn't the silky, lavender-scented bar you're used to. It was more like a social experiment in what happens when you mix animal fat, alkaline ash, and blind optimism. You see, back then, soap wasn't even universally accepted. Many people thought it opened the pores, and through those pores could come sickness, evil, or worse, personality change. You press the chunk to your nose, wince, and imagine someone on TikTok reviewing this as a vintage deep cleansing detox bar, circa 1250. No thanks, but you have no choice. Last night's stew bath only half did the job. You're itchy. And it's not just from the water. There's a non-zero chance you picked up lice, scabies, or a haunting. So, how does one wash with this soap? You ask the local bathhouse attendant, who looks like he hasn't used it a day in his life, and he grunts something about rubbing it on a brick and scrubbing yourself raw. Right. You go with your gut, rub it between your palms. It barely lathers. It's more a paste, and now your hands smell like someone boiled a goat inside a fireplace. You smear it across your arms anyway. It leaves streaks. Streaks of what, you're not sure. Cleanliness or soot-based lies? Around you, others are doing the same. Some are using cloths made of old linens, others opt for rough wool. One man proudly uses a fish scale scraper, a remnant from his work in the docks. You stare, horrified, as he gleefully scrapes off something that might once have been skin, or possibly his soul. And here's a little-known fact. In some regions, soap wasn't used on the body at all. It was for laundry. Clothes got the good stuff. Your skin, that was left to holy water, passive hope, and maybe the occasional herbal infusion if you were feeling fancy. You sigh and rinse off using a tin jug filled with lukewarm water that smells vaguely of iron and regret. It rolls down your skin in muddy rivulets, proof, at least, that something came off. You know what's worse? The wealthier folks, nobles and merchants. They sometimes paid for imported Castile soap, made from olive oil and alkaline salts. You've never seen it, but you've heard it was smooth, fragrant, and actually worked. The catch: it was expensive. So expensive that only the top 1% of society ever smelled like citrus. Meanwhile, here you are, rubbing pig grease and tree ash into your armpits and trying not to cry. Oh, and by the way, if you're lucky enough to travel through France or Italy during this era, you might encounter actual soap makers. Guilds formed to regulate the process, which sounds impressive until you realize regulations were more like polite suggestions. And sanitation, optional. Some of the early soap-making sites had more rats than soap. And remember, this stuff had to be boiled for hours, usually in open cauldrons, while the lye fumes danced around merrily, waiting to burn your lungs and give your eyes a medieval chemical peel. Which brings us to the question, why did anyone use this stuff? The answer, because it beat not using it, just barely. And because medieval people, contrary to popular belief, did care about cleanliness. It just looked different, smelled different, and involved more screaming. You dry off on a towel made of scratchy linen that has absorbed every scent from the previous 3 users. It's almost dry. Almost. Then, the moment of panic, your skin begins to itch more. You look down, it's red, angry. You've just had a lye reaction. Congratulations. You're clean, yes, but now your epidermis is plotting revenge. Historians still debate whether most medieval people used soap regularly or just occasionally. There are surviving records of soap being tacked and traded, which suggests it was valuable. But was it used on the body? That's less clear. Some scholars argue soap was more symbolic, a product of virtue and status, not hygiene. Others believe it was simply too harsh for daily use. Your skin agrees with the latter. You step outside again, skin raw, but soul marginally soothed. The sun is rising. The pigs are screaming in the alley, as usual. The baker's already burning the first loaf of bread. You smell smoky. But under that, there's a faint cleanness. Or maybe it's just the absence of yesterday's smell. Either way, it counts as progress. And you've survived another day of medieval bathing. Not bad for someone who cried over a lukewarm shower last week. Next time, we'll explore what happens when that water you're soaking in isn't just cloudy, but alive. Spoiler, it swims back. You return to the bathhouse 3 days later, feeling brave, or possibly just itchy again. It's hard to tell anymore. Your skin still remembers the last session with medieval soap, but your body has begun to emit a subtle blend of hayfield sweat, wood smoke, and something best described as fermenting wool. Today, you're promised fresh water. Now you're not naive. You understand fresh in the Middle Ages is aspirational, like calling a 3-day-old fish market ready. But still, You cling to hope. Maybe they changed the water. Maybe it came from a stream this time. Maybe, just maybe, no one peed in it. You step inside. It's the same tub. Same flower petals floating on top. Same man snoring with his mouth open, knee-deep in his 6th soak of the week. And the water, it's not so much fresh as room temperature with a hint of cheese. But you're here, so you do what you came to do. You wade in, slowly, carefully, like you're entering a sacred, but very questionable, shrine. The water laps at your ankles. It's thick, heavier than you remember. It clings. You pause. Then something brushes your leg. You jerk upright so fast you nearly fall back out. It wasn't a toe this time. It moved. You stare at the surface. Nothing. But then it happens again. A tickle against your calf. This is no hallucination. You're sharing a bath with something alive. You look around, panicking. A man across from you grins, revealing 3 teeth and a level of calm that can only come from years of coexisting with pond life. He shrugs. Leeches, he says. You freeze. He clarifies. They keep the blood flowing, good for the humors. Then he points to a woman on the other side who has one attached to her ankle and looks disturbingly peaceful. That's when it hits you. This bath water isn't just unclean, it's a living ecosystem. You'd heard whispers, legends of bath stew getting so stagnant it developed its own microclimate. Parasites, fungal spores, maybe a proto-frog or two. And today, you've officially been inducted into the kingdom of bathwater fauna. You decide not to scream, that would be rude. You instead slowly remove yourself from the tub and walk to the rinse basin, a smaller wooden bucket that looks more promising. You scoop some water and splash your face. It's cold, refreshing, not oily. And then you see it, wriggling, not a leech this time, something with legs. You look closer, a tiny insect, possibly a water beetle. Perhaps a medieval crustacean no one bothered to name. You're too afraid to squish it, lest it be someone's familiar. You back away. This isn't a bathhouse. It's a petri dish with a door charge. And yet, people love it. They come, again and again, for their weekly immersion in the broth. They claim it helps the joints, clears the mind, and in a way, maybe it does. The same way being hit by a cart makes you appreciate standing still. You spot a small boy near the corner holding something in a wooden bowl. He's fishing in the bath. You ask what he's doing. Catching floaters, he says. You pretend you didn't hear that. In the corner, someone begins humming again. The air grows steamier. You see the same used soap from last time sitting on a ledge, now partially melted like a tired mushroom. You take a breath, instantly regret it. There's something sulfuric in the air now. Someone must have added mustard seed or garlic oil to the tub, believing it wards off infection. Or maybe it's just seasoning for the bugs. The worst part? Your body is starting to adjust. The first few minutes were awful, but now you're beginning to enjoy the warmth, the murk, the gentle bump of someone's knee every 5 minutes. You're part of the soup now, and it is, against all logic, kind of relaxing. A man beside you begins to sing softly. It's a tune about St. Agnes and her legendary piety. The irony isn't lost on you. She died a virgin martyr. You're dying from bathwater intimacy with a dozen strangers. You lean back against the side of the tub. Wood creaks, water sloshes. A beetle scuttles across the rim and disappears behind a towel. You close your eyes. Your skin tingles, either from warmth or parasites. But for a moment, you feel still. This was the magic of the bathhouse. It wasn't about cleanliness. Not really. It was about community, a shared ritual. You might not be hygienic afterward, but you'd feel better. Lighter, bonded by bacteria and proximity trauma. Historians debate whether medieval baths spread more disease than they cured. Some say the warm water helped draw toxins out. Others point to outbreaks of lice, plague, and trench foot. Either way, the bathhouse survived for centuries. Through famine, war, and royalty who smelled like pickled onions and ambition. Because no matter how risky, people crave a moment of comfort, even if it involves an amphibian. As you climb out, slowly, dripping with what might be algae, you wrap yourself in the same communal towel as before. It's no drier, it's no cleaner, but somehow it now smells familiar, almost like home. You've leveled up. Tomorrow, you'll learn why it's not just the people in the bath that pose a threat, but what's happening when everyone bathes too close together. You're getting used to the smell. That's the first warning sign. The second is that you no longer flinch when someone steps into the tub beside you, sending a ripple of lukewarm water and foot particles up your chest. But today is different. Today, the bathhouse is crowded. You arrive just after sunset, hoping to beat the rush. But the rush has already beaten you. There's a line out the door, people clutching towels, buckets, and what appears to be a raw onion used for scent masking. A small child is gnawing on a clove of garlic, which might be protection from spirits, or simply bathhouse breath. Inside, the air is thicker than usual. Not quite fog, not quite steam. Something in between. You breathe through your sleeve. The bath itself looks like it's reached full occupancy, but people keep squeezing in. There's no formal regulation. If your body fits, you bathe. That's the rule. Knees overlap. Backs press against strangers. There's a woman knitting in the corner, ankle deep in what can only be described as communal broth. You hover at the edge. A man waves you in. There's a sliver of space beside him, if you're willing to fold yourself into the shape of a regretful pretzel. You are. So you slide in. The water level rises with a sad little glorp. You're now part of a living bath lasagna, each human a soft noodle in a multi-layered experience of bodily warmth and steam-aged moisture. Someone farts, no one reacts. You begin to understand why some monks took vows of silence. Speaking in this setting feels disrespectful. The air itself is sacred, or at least fermented. Then someone sneezes, and everything changes. You feel the shift immediately. People stiffen, heads turn. A ripple of paranoia rolls through the tub. Splashless but potent. You don't know who sneezed. Could have been the elderly man with the drippy nose. Could have been the baby chewing on someone's sandal. Either way, it triggers a realization. You're sharing a bath with at least 30 lungs, and none of them are clean. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where germ theory doesn't exist, but everyone instinctively knows when something feels off. A few people rise and leave the tub. One mutters a prayer. Another spits into the corner, just in case. You stay. Not because you're brave, but because your legs are pinned between two strangers and you physically cannot leave. The bathhouse, as it turns out, is more than just a hygiene center. It's a social engine. Business deals happen here. So do romantic arrangements, arguments, even courtship rituals. You overhear two merchants discussing grain prices over your shoulder. Literally, they're both leaning on you. Meanwhile, a young couple sits opposite you, holding hands and smiling bashfully, as though their date night doesn't involve soaking in recycled foot juice. There's no music, but someone starts humming again. Always someone. always humming. You're beginning to suspect it's not voluntary. Just a side effect of prolonged moisture exposure. As the tub grows fuller, your thoughts grow darker. The water's cloudier today, more opaque. You can no longer see your knees, which might be a blessing. Something bumps you under the surface. Too rounded to be a toe, too firm to be polite. You don't look down. Instead, you notice a scab peeling off someone's shoulder nearby. It floats for a moment, then dissolves into the murk like sugar in tea. You feel something inside you give up, possibly your immune system. And then the inevitable happens. A fight. Two men begin arguing over bath territory. It starts with a misplaced elbow, escalates into accusations of towel theft, and ends with one of them being forcibly submerged. A splash erupts. You catch a mouthful of bath water and immediately try to forget everything you know about bacteria. The attendants, two teenage boys with more pimples than authority, attempt to intervene with long wooden poles. It doesn't work. The men separate only after one fakes drowning. Calm returns. But the damage is done. The tub has been disturbed. All the layers, skin flakes, oils, maybe some centuries-old sediment, have been stirred. Now it's everywhere. People murmur. One woman throws her towel over her head and exits dramatically. You sit very still, because now even moving feels dangerous. Historians still debate how often people used these bathhouses. Weekly, monthly, only on St. Swithin's Day. The records vary. But what's clear is that overcrowding was a common issue. So common, in fact, that laws were passed in some towns to limit the number of bathers at once. Those laws were ignored. Because when warmth is scarce, when homes are cold, and when privacy is a myth, the bathhouse becomes a refuge, a steamy, fungal refuge. As the bath begins to clear out, you finally uncross your legs. Your feet are wrinkled beyond belief. Your arms are pruned. Your dignity? Long gone. You stand up slowly, like a biscuit rising in slow motion. And that's when you realize something else. You formed a kind of camaraderie with the strangers in the tub. You shared a moment, a pathogen probably, maybe a skin cell or two. But you also shared warmth, laughter, and mutual horror. You dry off? Same towel, don't ask. And as you step into the night, the cold wind bites your cheeks. It smells of manure and coal, but to you, it's fresh air. Sweet, cleansing, because after that bath, even medieval street sludge smells like salvation. But you're not done yet, because next time, we're diving into who shared those baths with you and why their professions made everything exponentially worse. You've started developing what might be called historical resilience. Not physical strength, mind you. Your immune system is still in open rebellion, but you're emotionally numb to things that would have sent you screaming 3 baths ago. Which is good, because tonight you're sharing the tub with a butcher, a plague nurse, and someone who describes themselves simply as an entertainer, with no further elaboration. The bathhouse is dim, as usual, lit by candles that sputter in the mist. The water is warmer than expected. Suspiciously warm, in fact. You suspect it was heated not long ago, which means this is probably the first round of bathers. Luxury. You've never felt so lucky to be early to anything in your life. You slide in with a polite nod to your neighbors. There's a soft groan from the wood beneath you, like the tub itself is tired of hosting humanity. To your left, the butcher. Broad shoulders, permanently blood-stained fingernails, and a smell that not even the steam can hide. He's humming a cheery tune and sharpening a knife on a whetstone he's brought into the bath with him. That's not a metaphor. He's literally exfoliating beside you while honing his cleaver. To your right, the nurse. Kind-faced, middle-aged, with hands that look gentle, until you remember what they've handled. She's rubbing something into her skin, some kind of ointment made from lard, vinegar, and herbs. It smells like pickled meat and old garlic. You don't ask questions. Across from you, the entertainer. They wink at you immediately. It's unclear whether they are flirting or if their eyelid is twitching from steam exposure. Either way, you avoid eye contact and try to look very interested in your own knees. The water bubbles gently. You try to relax, but your brain won't stop cataloguing professions. There's another man at the far end who smells faintly of incense and old vellum. A scribe, perhaps. You spot a woman in heavy robes, likely a healer or someone pretending to be one. And a child darting between towels like a feral squirrel, possibly just a local. This isn't a bath. It's a resume soup. Everyone's job follows them in, physically. The butcher brings blood under his nails. The nurse brings the faint scent of herbal tinctures and despair. The scribe leaves smudges of ink on the side of the tub, and it all ends up in the water. You shift slightly, avoiding a floating feather. Where did that come from? Was it once part of a quill, a pillow, a chicken? You will never know. You think back to a story someone told you earlier that day of bathhouses that catered specifically to certain trades. In some towns, bathers were grouped, butchers in the early morning, priests around midday, farmers at dusk, and so on. A kind of scheduling system likely invented by the only person who cared about boundaries in the entire kingdom. But that was rare. Most of the time, the bathhouse was a glorious free-for-all. A steamy, egalitarian mess where the bishop might rub elbows with the town drunk, and no one dared ask if either had washed their feet first. As you float in this human broth, the entertainer begins to sing, badly. It's a bawdy tune about a knight and a goose that you're fairly certain is illegal in most countries. The butcher chuckles. The nurse joins in for the chorus. You sit quietly, pondering your life choices. Then someone sneezes again, and you realize, for the 5th time this week, you're still here. Still bathing, still surviving. There's comfort in the chaos. Something almost beautiful about it. Everyone's equal here, stripped of status, titles, and, let's be honest, personal space. The bath becomes warmer as more people enter. You shift to make room. A man steps in holding a bird cage. You don't even ask. A new arrival climbs in beside you. She's wrapped in what was once a velvet cloak, now damp and tattered. She introduces herself as an herbalist, then offers you something from her satchel, a bath additive, she claims. Ground thyme and elderflower. You nod politely and accept. It smells decent. She sprinkles it into the tub. And for a brief moment, the water smells like a forest. Then the butcher sneezes and ruins it. You've been in here long enough to lose track of time. The entertainer is now giving a dramatic monologue. The nurse is dozing. You, against all odds, are enjoying yourself. Maybe this is what people came for, not the cleanliness, but the camaraderie, the strange intimacy of strangers who smell equally awful and have nothing to hide. A shared vulnerability, a pact of silence. I won't judge your fungal rash if you don't judge mine. Historians still debate how these bathhouses operated day to day. Some suggest separate tubs by gender or class. Others argue that most towns just threw everyone in together, especially during festivals or feast days. There's no definitive answer, but based on tonight, you're inclined to believe that everyone bathed together. Rich, poor, clean, unclean, one-legged, poetic, grumpy, contagious, all equal in the stew. And yes, It was gross. But it was human. You eventually climb out, limbs heavy, skin pruny, hair damp with secrets. You dry off beside the butcher, who nods solemnly and says something about sausage. You don't ask. Outside, the moon is high. The streets are quiet, and you, though not truly clean, feel rinsed of something intangible. Tomorrow we'll explore how faith and fear dictated who bathed when, and who wasn't allowed to at all. Tonight, the bathhouse is quiet. Not empty. Never empty. But there's a hush in the air, like something sacred is supposed to happen here. The chatter is softer. The buckets clank less. Even the water seems to ripple more reverently, as though it's in on the mood. You slip in as usual, your feet now long past hesitating, and the water greets you like an old friend with questionable hygiene. But you feel it immediately. There's something different. You glance around. No butchers. No rowdy merchants. No one singing about questionable poultry and inappropriate nights. Instead, the bath is filled with people in robes, heavy, modest, some with crosses around their necks, others muttering prayers under their breath. A nun sits at the edge of the tub, dabbing her hands delicately into the water, as if cleansing only the parts that won't require confession later. You've stumbled into religious bath day. You hadn't realized they still existed. Special times reserved for the faithful, the devout, or at least those deemed appropriately clean in soul, if not in body. And tonight's bathhouse is practicing a peculiar blend of hygiene and holiness. You nod politely to a friar beside you. He smells of candle wax and boiled cabbage, but his beard is perfectly parted. He acknowledges you with a slow blink, then returns to staring contemplatively at the ceiling, as if searching for divine answers in the mold stains. You try not to splash. Splashing, you sense, would be a mortal sin tonight. Instead, you lower yourself slowly, trying not to disturb the holy water stew. The temperature is surprisingly pleasant. The soap provided, a rare gift, is shaped into little pellets and smells faintly of lavender and penance. The woman next to you gently rubs her arms with a cloth embroidered with what appears to be a saint. You've never felt less prepared to bathe. Your towel has a hole in it and smells like sheep. You're clearly the spiritual underachiever of the group. A quiet voice begins chanting. You turn. It's the nun again, softly humming a Latin hymn that makes the air seem heavier. A few others join in. It becomes a bathhouse lullaby. Not unpleasant, just eerie, like being washed in a monastery with questionable plumbing. You glance up at the ceiling out of instinct. No divine signs, just mildew. This is where the line between cleanliness and purity begins to blur. In the Middle Ages, physical washing often tied directly to spiritual cleansing. Water was a tool, not just for skin, but for the soul. Baptisms, ritual immersions, purification before prayer. Certain holy days even encouraged public baths as part of repentance. But here's the catch. Not everyone was allowed. That's what's bothering you tonight. You look around. Everyone here is of a certain type. Pale robes, pale skin, familiar accents, the same scrolls of saints and psalms murmured under breath. And it hits you. This bath isn't just religious. It's exclusive. People of other faiths, Jews, Muslims, often weren't allowed in communal baths during certain periods. Sometimes they had separate hours, sometimes separate facilities entirely, and sometimes they were simply banned. Cleanliness, in theory, was for everyone. But in practice, it was subject to fear, faith, and politics. In some regions, Jewish communities maintained their own ritual bath, mikvehs, beautiful in their tradition and meaning. often cleaner than public bathhouses. But that didn't stop others from accusing them of bringing in disease, especially during times of plague or famine. Muslims, too, had their own hygiene customs, thorough, meticulous, daily ablutions, but those were often mocked or misunderstood by their Christian neighbors, who bathed far less frequently and, paradoxically, accused others of being unclean. You soak in silence, watching the nun wring out her cloth, as if squeezing the sin out of the fabric. You're surrounded by rituals that feel ancient and profound, but also exclusionary. There's comfort here, yes, but only if you belong. And you tonight feel like an outsider. You shift slightly. The friar looks over, his eyes scanning your expression. Then, unexpectedly, he offers you a small lump of soap. You take it. It smells of rosemary and humility. Maybe, just maybe, you're being accepted. Maybe in this tub of whispered hymns and careful silence, there's room for one more soul, spotted though it may be. You begin to lather, gently, reverently. You think of the people who would have been turned away from this very water. People judged not for dirt, but for belief. And suddenly, your skin feels heavier. Historians still argue how religion shaped bathing habits. Some claim that the early church discouraged excessive washing, equating it with vanity. Others point to monastic orders that bathed regularly, believing cleanliness reflected divine order. The truth, as always, is murky, like this water. What's clear is that bathing was never just about the body. It was about who you were, what you believed, whether the people in power thought you deserved to be clean. You rise quietly, letting the water fall from your limbs like an unspoken prayer. The chanting fades behind you. The night air greets you like an old friend with cold hands. You step into the street, not cleaner exactly, but changed. Tomorrow, we'll return to the high-born and explore why castles, with all their splendor, had baths just as dirty, if not worse. You'd think that by now, you'd be used to disappointment. After all, you've bathed in murky broth with strangers, been bumped by floating scabs, nearly adopted a bathtub beetle, and survived a sneeze that triggered a minor spiritual crisis. So when you hear that you've been invited to bathe in a castle, you foolishly allow hope to flutter inside your chest. It dies quickly, because tonight's bath isn't warm, it's not even wet, yet. First, you have to boil the water yourself. Welcome to noble bathing. You're standing in a stone room the size of a modern pantry. There's a small hearth in one corner, some wooden buckets, a tub made of lead. Yes, lead. And an old woman scowling at you like you've insulted her pickled herring. She's your bath attendant. Her name is Agnetha. She's been doing this since before the last 3 plagues. She hands you a small lump of soap that smells like boiled cabbage and then points to the buckets. Start filling. Apparently, being a guest in the castle doesn't mean you're above labor. You're told that the castle's servants are all busy, which likely means hiding behind tapestries and praying you don't ask them to clean the privy. So you fetch the water from a cistern. It's cold. Shockingly so. You carry it inside, bucket by bucket, while Agnetha adds logs to the fire and glares at the tub like it owes her money. Eventually, after what feels like hours, there's enough warm water to cover your ankles. Agnetha dumps in a handful of dried herbs, mint and maybe something that used to be sage. The steam rises. It smells vaguely of soup and regret. You step in. It is not awful. That's the highest compliment you've given a bath so far. Then Agnetha starts scrubbing. She doesn't ask. She just attacks. She's got a brush that could double as a horse grooming tool and the grip strength of a blacksmith. You yelp. She huffs. You're soft, she mutters, like a monk with a rash. You endure. Because apparently, this is how nobles bathe, or at least how they used to, before they got too rich and too lazy and delegated the whole process to people like Agnetha. You sit in silence as she works, slowly, methodically, like she's cleaning a very confused goose. Eventually, she lets you rinse. You pour a jug of water over yourself. It dribbles down your chest, warm and grayish. Either the water's dirty or your sins are. The tub, which once held clearish water, now looks like someone boiled sadness in it. And here's the kicker. You're only the first bather tonight. Once you're done, the water won't be tossed. It'll be topped up, stirred a little. Maybe perfumed with rosemary if someone's feeling festive. Then the next noble gets their turn. You're told the queen herself bathes third. You try not to think about that too much. Because the truth is, even in castles, baths were rare. Heating water took time, labor, firewood, and so, when it happened, everyone used the same tub, from the lord of the manor to the youngest squire. Cleanliness was a communal privilege, even in palaces. In fact, the richer the household, the less frequently they bathed. Why? Because they could afford perfume, and silks, and powdered wigs to hide lice infestations. Cleanliness became an illusion, crafted with rosewater and deception. You dry off, using a cloth so stiff it might actually be a table runner. Agnetha helps. She's not gentle. You're handed new clothes, linen underthings that smell faintly of lavender and ash. You're told they were aired near the fire. You suspect they were just smoked. Still, you feel elevated. Not cleaner, exactly, but wrapped in castle expectations. Nobility, it seems, isn't about hygiene. It's about confidence. You stroll through the stone corridor, passing rooms filled with tapestries and barely concealed drafts. You notice that the castle doesn't smell great. Despite all its grandeur, the air is thick with smoke, sweat, and, yes, urine. You pass a hallway with a bucket labeled chamber pot. You do not investigate. Historians still debate how often nobles actually bathed. Some claim once a month. Others, only for ceremonial occasions. There are records of royal bathtubs with golden trim, rarely used. Queen Elizabeth I famously claimed she bathed once a month, whether she needed it or not. Charming. But at least now you understand. Castles weren't cleaner. They were just draftier, colder, and more theatrical about pretending they didn't stink. You step out onto the balcony. The wind hits you like a cleansing spell. The stars are out. The moat glistens below, dark and probably full of ducks and dead things. And somewhere, deep in the castle, Agnetha is scrubbing out your bathwater with what looks like a medieval spatula. You thank her under your breath. Tomorrow, you'll head back to the village, where the bathhouses are louder, smellier, and somehow more honest. But before that, we'll explore the forgotten corners of bath culture. The traveling tubs, mobile stews, and why some people bathed in barrels on wheels. You never thought you'd envy a barrel. But here you are, trudging through a cobbled road behind a cart that's sloshing gently like a giant wooden soup bowl on wheels. Inside it, a man soaking cheerfully, whistling a tune while the cart wobbles over potholes. His elbows hang over the rim. Steam rises around him in lazy curls. You lock eyes as he passes, and he nods. Like this is normal, and in a way, it is. Welcome to the world of traveling tubs, a medieval solution to the complex problem of, I want to be clean, but I also want to move around and maybe stop at the tavern afterward. You've been told there's a man in town, old Bartow, who rents out mobile bath barrels for a modest fee. He parks outside market squares, churches, and town gates, offering hot baths for the body and balm for the soul. He even has a little hand-painted sign with a grinning pig sitting in a tub. The tagline, "Cleaner than your thoughts." You pay him a few coins. He nods, slaps the side of a barrel, and says, "That one still has warmth from a bishop." You do not ask which bishop, or how recently. The barrel is just wide enough to fit your shoulders. There's a small seat carved into the side which feels suspiciously smooth, like many nervous thighs have sat here before. The water is lukewarm and smells of lavender, and possibly leek soup. Bartow slams the lid halfway shut, leaving your head exposed, and snaps the cart handles into place. "Where are we headed?" he asks. You have no idea. So you say, "Surprise me." And off you go, rolling through the village in a hot barrel. You pass bakeries, taverns, that same goat from 3 nights ago. Children point. An old man claps. A woman throws a flower into your tub. It floats beside your armpit like a disoriented blessing. It's ridiculous. And also, kind of wonderful. The warmth rocks with the movement of the cart. You feel like a dumpling in transit. People cheer. Someone yells, "Do a trick!" You raise one pruned hand and wave like royalty. A cabbage bounces off your lid. Then it hits you. These traveling tubs weren't just gimmicks. They were practical. In a world without indoor plumbing, without public baths in every village, you brought the bath to the people. Or rather, you became the bath. And the people watched you roll by. Some wealthier individuals had private bath barrels with wooden wheels and ornate covers. They were rolled onto balconies, into gardens, or down stone hallways by teams of servants. Think of them as the medieval version of a luxury hot tub, except more splinters, fewer bubbles, and occasionally chickens. There's even evidence of bath wagons designed for weddings. The bride and groom were bathed separately, then ceremonially paraded through town, still soaking, like wet laundry on public display. Romantic, your journey continues. Bartow hums as he pulls you along. He takes a sharp corner. You slosh. A nearby monk blesses you mid-roll. You're not sure if it's for the bath or the ride. Then you spot a rival cart, another barrel, another bather. It's a teenager, lounging like a prince, eating something fried on a stick. You make eye contact. The air thickens. There is an ancient understanding between mobile bathers. The water is shared, the streets are stage, and dignity is optional. He nods. You nod back. This is your turf now. Bartow parks you near the market square, where a small crowd has gathered. You're offered a pastry. You accept. Steam rises from your barrel as you chew, soaking and snacking like some absurd aquatic noble. Then, from behind a curtain of onion sellers, a group of jesters rolls by in 3 tubs lashed together, laughing and tossing rose petals into the air. Bathing, it seems, is no longer just a chore. It's theater. Some traveling baths even had musicians, lute players who followed along, strumming romantic ballads while their clients' toes wrinkled in rhythm. Wealthy patrons once hired entire troops to perform while they soaked. You begin to wonder, has hygiene ever been this fun? Probably not. But that's the point. In a world where cleanliness was elusive, spectacle replaced soap. If you couldn't bathe in private luxury, you might as well parade in public absurdity. Bartow taps your lid. "That's your lap done," he says. You climb out, wrinkled, red-cheeked, and faintly herbal. He hands you a towel that smells like sun-dried hay. You thank him. He winks. "Tell your friends." You watch as he pushes the barrel away, already humming a new tune. Another customer climbs in, looking nervous but hopeful. You feel lighter, cleaner, maybe not entirely, but definitely better. And tomorrow, you'll dive into the love affair between bathhouses and scandal, because where there's hot water, steam, and naked people, there's always a story. You've been in a lot of strange tubs by now. You've shared space with butchers, noble women, beetles, and the ghost of sanitation's good intentions. You've bathed in barrels that rolled and tubs that hummed. But tonight, you're stepping into something a little warmer. And not because of the water. You've arrived at a private bathhouse, one of the nicer ones, the kind frequented not by traveling merchants or tired farmers, but by the well-dressed, well-perfumed, and slightly too flirtatious. This isn't just a place to get clean. It's a place where people pretend they're getting clean while getting up to something else entirely. The door creaks open. A wave of warm, herb-scented air rolls over you like a damp silk sheet. Inside, candlelight dances along tiled walls. The tubs here are smaller, cozier, designed not for efficiency, but for intimacy. Someone offers you wine. You take it, of course. You've earned it. As you sip, you glance around. There's laughter, not the usual nervous cackling of people knee-deep in other people's foot juice, but a light, practiced giggle, the kind that ends in a gentle touch on the arm and, maybe eventually, a scandal. This is where bathing and flirting blurred into one slippery social ritual. In many medieval towns, bathhouses doubled as meeting places, and not just for business deals or religious chatter. No, here, the deals were made in whispers, over warm water and shared towels. Courtships began beside the soap bucket. Affairs bloomed in the steam. Some bathhouses were openly attached to brothels. Others merely hinted. A velvet curtain here, a closed-off private tub there. A menu of scented oils that had less to do with cleaning and more to do with ambiance. You ease into a tub beside a man who introduces himself as Sir Reinald, but only on weekends. He offers you grapes. You don't ask where he got them. The water is warm, almost luxurious. The scent of cloves and orange peels fills your nose. A lute plays softly in another room. Somewhere nearby, someone is being gently splashed, judging by the giggle and the very suspicious second splash. You're not surprised, because this was part of bath culture too. Eroticism cloaked in lie. In fact, some medieval cities tried to shut these places down. The authorities passed laws banning immoral bathing, particularly when men and women shared tubs. In Paris, in Nuremberg, in London, councils wrung their hands and drafted long-winded complaints about the dangers of co-ed soaping. But it never really stuck, because people, as it turns out, like bathing together, and because a bathhouse offered something rare, privacy that wasn't private, a social setting where boundaries blurred, along with intentions. You spot a woman across the room laughing with two friends. Her hair is pinned with something that looks expensive. Her feet rest on a heated stone. She catches your eye, smiles, then returns to her conversation. You glance away, quickly. You're not here for trouble, or at least not that kind. But you begin to understand why bathhouses were the subject of so many medieval complaints. Clergy condemned them. Moralist writers ranted. Preachers warned that the devil himself lurked in the steam between the scent of rosewater and the slipperiness of temptation. And yet, the bathhouses stayed open, because people didn't just come for the water. They came to feel human, to be touched in a time when most touching was either violent or medicinal, to laugh, to flirt, to soak, beside someone interesting and maybe share a secret. You lie back in the tub and let the steam rise around your face. The water laps gently. The room grows softer, quieter. In the next tub, someone is reciting poetry. Badly. No one minds. You feel a hand brush your towel. You look down. It's just a kitten. Probably belongs to the owner. Or maybe it's a regular. Either way, you let it stay. Historians argue endlessly about these pleasure bathhouses. Some insist they were just exaggerated tavern tales. Others point to tax records, city ordinances, and letters that suggest otherwise. There are accounts of couples being caught mid-soap, and even bathhouse workers fined for facilitating impropriety. But the truth is, bathing and desire have always shared water. You finish your wine. Someone brings you a small cake. Tastes like honey and cinnamon and minor regret. You dry off slowly, in no rush to leave. The laughter continues behind you, soft and easy. And tomorrow you'll visit the other extreme, monasteries, hermits, and the strange belief that staying dirty was holier than being clean. You've been scrubbed, soaked, splashed, and serenaded. You've bathed with barons, beetles, and barrel-bound strangers. So naturally, the next step in your medieval bathing saga is to stop bathing altogether, because tonight you're spending time with people who believed that filth wasn't just a fact of life. It was a virtue. Welcome to the monastery. The air here is different. The air here is different. It doesn't smell like herbs or boiled water. It smells like wool robes, candle soot, and bodies that haven't been wet since the last significant religious schism. You walk slowly down the stone corridor, your footsteps muffled by silence. The only sound is the occasional cough, the rustle of parchment, or the hollow echo of self-denial. No chatter, no laughter, and certainly no tubs. At the end of the hallway sits Brother Gervais. He hasn't bathed in 7 years. You're not supposed to speak to him unless he initiates. You're also not supposed to wrinkle your nose. You fail both tests within 10 seconds. He nods at you, solemn. His robes are stiff. His skin is hidden behind layers of fabric, dust, and what appears to be a crust made of time and good intentions. You wonder, briefly, if he's held together entirely by divine will and sweat. You sit beside him, respectfully distant. This is where things get weird. Because in some medieval religious circles, especially among certain monks, hermits, and ascetics, not bathing was seen as a form of holy devotion. Cleanliness, that was for the vain, the indulgent, the distracted. True piety, they believed, came through abstinence, from food, from comfort, from baths. Imagine going decades without a real wash. The itch alone could send a saint into existential despair. But these men, and sometimes women, did just that. They wore the same robes until they rotted. They let lice live in their hair as a test of humility, and they stank proudly. You try not to judge Brother Gervais. After all, he's not here to be clean. He's here to be pure. And apparently, those are not the same thing. He finally speaks. "Soap is vanity," he says. You nod. He continues, "Water tempts the flesh." You nod again, more slowly. Then he sneezes. And for the first time in your life, you want to pray for a bacterial intervention, but you hold your breath, respectfully, and remind yourself this was real. People really believed this. In some monastic rules, bathing was limited to once a year. Once a year. And even that was often performed as part of a ritual. Before Easter, for instance. Not because anyone smelled particularly inviting, but because symbolic purity mattered more than physical hygiene. Some saints took things further. There's the story of Saint Francis of Assisi, who rolled in snow and thorns to distract himself from sinful thoughts, which seems like an overreaction but does explain the lack of hot tubs in his order. Or Saint Guthlac, who lived alone in a swamp, ate barley gruel, and was covered in boils, yet was widely admired. Or Saint Simeon Stylites, who lived on top of a pillar for 37 years, exposed to the elements, rarely washing, and attracting admirers and flies. These weren't fringe cases. These were celebrities of piety. Their filth was their fame. It was the medieval equivalent of going viral, just with more pustules. You leave Brother Gervais with a quiet "thank you." He doesn't respond. His eyes are closed, lost in contemplation, or possibly just very tired. Outside the monastery, the world feels louder, fresher, almost vulgar. But you can't shake the thought. In this world, where people went to steamy bathhouses for gossip, laughter, and occasionally romance, some chose the opposite path. They scrubbed their souls, not their skin. And while you may not be ready to toss your soap, there's a strange peace to it. A kind of dignity, even in decay. You sniff your sleeve. Just checking. Still fine. You walk back toward the village, your footsteps a little lighter. And tomorrow, you'll meet the people who bathed with urgency. Not for fun, not for God, but because something was coming, and it wasn't good. The church bells are ringing, not the melodic kind that announce a feast day or call monks to matins. No, this is a low, urgent toll that hangs heavy in the air like wet wool. People move faster in the streets. Mothers pull children indoors. Doors slam shut, one after another. You're still dripping from your morning splash at the communal fountain when you hear the first whisper, "It's back." And just like that, everyone starts bathing, frantically, obsessively. In water boiled over smoky fires, in tubs dragged into courtyards, in streams if they're lucky, in vinegar if they're scared, in urine if they're desperate. Because plague has returned. And when death comes knocking, medieval people, contrary to popular belief, didn't just throw up their hands and die poetically. Number, they scrubbed, they bathed, they purified their bodies the best way they knew how. They tried. You duck into a bathhouse that's been hastily reopened. There are no candles, no flirtation, no cheerful attendants humming through the steam. Just silence, broken by the slosh of water and the soft chant of someone reciting prayers in Latin under their breath. The air is sharp with vinegar. Everything reeks of effort. You sit down on a wooden stool. The tub before you is half full, lukewarm, brownish, and still steaming faintly. Someone has sprinkled dried rosemary and thyme across the surface, likely in hopes that the herbs will ward off the pestilence. You're told to soak, scrub, rinse, repeat. You obey. Your skin is raw by the time you finish. You're given a cloth soaked in wine to wipe your face. A woman with trembling hands offers you a lump of wax to chew. Cleanses the mouth, she says, though it mostly tastes like regret. But you chew anyway, because the theory went like this. Bad smells were dangerous. Disease, especially the plague, was believed to travel on miasmas, foul, corrupt air that seeped into your pores, your breath, your very soul. So washing was a way of fighting back. You didn't know about bacteria or viruses. But you knew that when people smelled foul and cities stank, death followed close behind. So everyone bathed. Barbers advertised plague washings that promised to draw out the humors. Apothecaries sold scrub stones. Midwives prescribed foot baths filled with garlic and elderflower. One physician suggested a full-body immersion in warmed wine. Another insisted on bathing in rainwater caught under a rainbow. Desperate times. Creative tubs. You overhear a man say he's bathed 3 times this week, more than he had in the previous 3 years. His skin looks like old parchment, cracked and flaking. But he smiles. Says he hasn't seen a rat in 3 days. And that feels like a sign. You nod. Then a woman sneezes in the corner. Everyone freezes. Someone crosses themselves. Another spits into a bucket. The attendants begin quietly packing up herbs. The door creaks open, and you feel the tension in the room snap like a bowstring. Because here's the secret that no one writes in the manuscripts. Even at their most superstitious, most terrified, most tragically misinformed, medieval people did not give up. They bathed when it hurt. They scrubbed when it did nothing. They rubbed vinegar into their children's feet and tied garlic to their cats and burned bundles of lavender in the streets. They tried everything, anything. They washed, not to feel beautiful, but to feel less helpless. Historians debate whether bathing helped or hurt during outbreaks. Some records suggest that open pores made the body more vulnerable to bad airs. Others argue that the act of washing, paired with cleaning clothes and homes, likely did slow transmission, at least a little. But again, that's modern logic. To the people here, bathing was a ritual of resistance, a fragile, hopeful magic. You step outside, still damp, into a city that's trying to breathe clean air while holding its breath. The streets are quieter now, doors shuttered. Cloths soaked in perfume or piss hang from windows, fluttering like grim little flags of war. You hear a child laughing, just once. A reminder that life doesn't pause, even when death circles. And tomorrow, you'll visit the nobility once more, not in castles, but in tombs, where the cleanest bath of all was posthumous, and where purity was preserved in wax, spice, and sometimes deception. There's something unsettling about how clean the dead are. You're standing in a crypt now, beneath a chapel floor, where the air is cool and still and smells faintly of beeswax and ancient dust. Stone walls press in around you. Candles flicker just enough to make you feel watched. And before you lies a body, laid out, dressed in its finest linen, hands crossed neatly, skin pale and suspiciously pristine. They've been dead for 3 days, and they've never looked better. Welcome to the most morbid bathhouse you've yet encountered, where cleanliness is eternal, and soap is replaced with spices, shrouds, and symbolic gestures. You see, in life, the nobility often skipped baths, but in death, oh, they were scrubbed down like sacred relics, because dying wasn't just about leaving the world, it was about making an impression on the way out. And nothing made a better impression than a corpse that didn't smell. You watch as attendants, quiet, methodical, begin the burial preparations for another noble. They move like choreographers in a strange ballet. Water is poured, cloths soaked, herbs scattered. This isn't a bath of comfort or relaxation. It's one of duty, of fear, because rot comes quickly, and rot is impolite. So they wash the body. They anoint it with sweet oils, rose, cinnamon, myrrh. They stuff dried lavender into the sleeves. They dust the skin with fine powders and wrap it tightly in linen until the shape is more mummy than man. Sometimes, if the family is particularly devout or terrified, the process involves wax coating. Imagine being dipped like a candle in preservation, your pores sealed for eternity. Other times, they pack the orifices with herbs. Yes, even there. Because bad smells weren't just offensive, they were thought to invite demons. Or worse, judgment. And you, for the first time in this journey, are clean but cold. You stand beside a body that has received more soap than most peasants did in life. A baroness, maybe. Her face is serene, her cheeks pinched with the faintest trace of rouge. You wonder what she was like when she laughed, when she complained about the cold, when she hadn't been pickled in rose water. A priest nearby murmurs a prayer. Another body lies ready for transport. You help carry the tub of water back outside. Stale now, pink-tinged and swirling with floating petals. You think back to your last bath in a tavern barrel. This one feels holier, but less human. Because this was the final bath, the one that everyone received, eventually. Even if they couldn't afford soap in life, the dead were cleansed, because death was supposed to be pure, peaceful, and in a strange way, hygienic. It wasn't just about decay, it was about legacy. Families went to great lengths to make their dearly departed seem untouched by rot. Not just for religious reasons, but for status. A clean body was a respectable body. An odorless corpse meant dignity. Immortality of a kind began with a proper wash. And in the noble class, some even built private chapels with stone slabs, not just to display the body, but to bathe it in a kind of sacred farewell. These weren't funerals, they were performances. You leave the crypt with a chill. Outside the sun has set. You hear distant bells tolling, not warning like before, but marking the end of the day. A soft hush settles over the village. The wind carries the scent of lavender from the chapel door. It's comforting, but also uncanny. Historians still debate how widespread these posthumous bathings were. Some say they were common only among the very rich. Others believe the ritual extended far beyond what records suggest, into folk practice hidden behind church doors and whispered customs. Either way, one thing is clear. Even in death, people bathed. And not for themselves, but for those they left behind. Tomorrow, we return to the living, to explore a place where baths were more than tubs. They were medications. We'll step inside the strange world of sweat cures, healing waters, and why medieval people believed steam could save your soul, or at least your liver. You're sweating before you even step inside. The room is thick with heat, moist, spiced, and tinged with something vaguely medicinal, like old time and regret. Stone walls glisten with condensation. A narrow vent in the ceiling lets in just enough air to make sure no one actually perishes from suffocation. Welcome to the medieval sweat cure, a place where the only prescription is boil yourself. Slowly. You're not alone. There are 6 other people in here with you. Shirts off, skin slick, eyes half closed in varying degrees of surrender. One man appears to be praying. Another is aggressively applying what looks like mustard paste to his armpits. You try not to stare. Tonight's bath isn't about cleanliness. It's about healing. Because in the medieval imagination, illness wasn't just something you caught. It was something you harbored. Inside, deep in your guts, in your blood, in your humors. And the best way to get rid of it, sweat it out, literally. You settle onto a bench. The stone is warm, almost too warm. Your towel sticks immediately. A woman next to you nods in greeting and offers you a small cloth soaked in vinegar. For your head, she says. Helps balance the bile. You don't know what bile has to do with anything, but you take it anyway. It smells like sour hope. In the corner, a man coughs violently, then apologizes with alarming politeness. You've entered a sweat lodge, medieval style. Not quite a bathhouse, not quite a sick room, but something in between. These were common in towns that couldn't afford full bathhouses. or in periods when open bathing fell out of favor, especially during plagues or winters. The idea was simple. Steam cleanses. Not just the skin, but the soul, the lungs, the evil humors that caused everything from headaches to heartbreak. And so, you sweat. You sit until your fingers wrinkle, until your hair clings to your face, until your thoughts slow and you begin to seriously contemplate whether this is what soup feels like from the inside. A man passes you a bowl. It's filled with herbs, marjoram, sage, chamomile, and a generous helping of crushed garlic. Inhale, he says. You do. Your sinus is clear, then immediately catch fire. He nods approvingly. Healers, sometimes licensed, sometimes just ambitious, ran these places like spas mixed with spiritual clinics. They prescribed herb blends, directed breathing techniques, and massaged limbs with oils heated over coals. You weren't just being treated, you were being purged. Of phlegm, sorrow, spiritual malaise, whatever was afflicting you. One noblewoman wrote that after 6 hours in a sweat cure, she was freed from her melancholy and able to eat again without cursing the bread. A real improvement, frankly. You lie back. Let the steam rise. A new bowl is passed around, this one filled with hot stones. Someone pours water over them. The hiss is immediate, satisfying. It sounds like pain leaving the body. Or maybe dinner. The woman next to you starts to sing softly. A lullaby, you think, or a hymn to Saint Roch, patron of plagues and dog lovers. Either way, it's soothing. You wonder how many people actually got better in here. Historians still debate that. Some say the sweating weakened the sick. Others argue it helped, especially for skin ailments, joint pain, or early fevers. But all agree on one thing. People believed in it. Belief in a world without antibiotics or clean water went a long way. You sit a little longer, letting the sweat run down your spine. You think of modern saunas, spa detoxes, celebrity juice cleanses. Maybe we're not so different. Maybe we still think the cure is to sweat, breathe, and hope. Eventually, someone throws open the door. Cool air rushes in. You gasp. A collective sigh ripples through the room. Outside, you're handed a cup of water. You drink it in one long pull. It tastes like herbs, salt, and absolution. You feel lighter, not cleaner, not healthier, but somehow lighter. And tomorrow, you'll follow the trail to the exotic, to the trade of bath salts, spices, and oils that crossed continents, carried by merchants who never bathed the same way twice. You'll find out why your medieval tub sometimes smelled like Egypt, and why that may have cost someone their life. Your tub tonight smells expensive. There's a sweetness to it, a warmth, notes of cinnamon, clove, and something sharper, like oranges left to dry on a windowsill in summer. The water is tinged gold, and when you trail your hand through it, a thin shimmer follows. No beetles, no broth, no shared peasant feet, just luxury. You lean back, close your eyes, and let the water hold you. Welcome to the world of exotic bath imports, where your medieval self might not understand the trade routes, but you definitely know the difference between bathwater and bathwater with sass. It all starts with a small ceramic jar. You're handed one by a traveling merchant in the town square. He wears too many rings and smells like dust and ambition. The jar is sealed with wax, painted with tiny palm trees, and labeled in a script you can't read. From Damascus, he whispers, for your skin and your sins. You raise an eyebrow. He winks. You buy two. Back home, you pry it open. Inside is a thick paste, amber, spicy, and so fragrant you feel a little guilty. You scrape some into your tub. The water hisses. A puff of scent rises that smells like the afterlife, if the afterlife had a strong cinnamon-forward profile, and you realize something important. This bath is political, because behind every spice, oil, and grain of exotic bath salt is a merchant, a risk, a caravan trail, a storm-tossed ship, and a handful of nobles who would kill, or at least levy a tariff, to have first access. Frankincense from Arabia, myrrh from Ethiopia, sandalwood from India, camphor from China, rose water from Persia, all of it crossing thousands of miles, through danger and negotiation before ending up in your very modest wooden tub. People say medieval Europe was isolated. That's a myth. Your bath is proof. You, lying here like a scented raisin, are the end point of a global network. Even your soap, if you're lucky, may be made from imported Castile olive oil mixed with lye and scented with something that sounds mythical, like ambergris, which, fun fact, is whale vomit, but very fancy whale vomit. You're not just bathing. You're participating in centuries of cultural borrowing, sometimes with permission, often not. In fact, some of these ingredients were so prized that cities went to war over them. The control of spice routes wasn't just about food, it was about fragrance, medicine, status, and bathing rituals. There's a story about a queen, probably Eleanor of Aquitaine, though no one agrees, who refused to bathe without rose water from Damascus. Her servants allegedly traveled for months to fetch it, and when they returned, she bathed for 2 straight days, emerging only for fruit and poetry. You admire the energy, but even among common folk, a little spice went a long way. A handful of cloves might be added to a communal bath during festival days. A few drops of imported oil would be reserved for a wedding night. Some apothecaries sold tiny pouches of bather's blend, supposedly to make your sweat smell like sanctity. You breathe deeply. This tub might be your best yet. And yet, even as you soak, you hear the quiet truth. Not everyone was allowed access to these luxuries. Bathing, once a communal act, became more and more exclusive. The more perfumed the water, the smaller the circle of those who could afford it. Baths became hierarchical. Your scent marked your status. Your oils told a story. And if your tub smelled like something from Constantinople, you were either very rich or very good at lying. Historians still debate how widespread these luxury baths really were. Some claim they were confined to courts and major cities. Others believe even modest homes experimented with spice blends, just less consistently. But all agree that trade transformed bathing from habit to ritual. You finally stand, skin flushed, muscles soft, scent rich enough to make a monastery jealous. You towel off with something that smells faintly of honeycomb. Outside, the world is cooler, less fragrant, but you carry the bath with you. Tomorrow, we'll explore what happens when baths go missing, when whole cities forget how to soak, when public tubs are shut down, and when the art of bathing fades into superstition and dust. Something's missing. You feel it the moment you arrive in town. No steam drifting through alleyways, no clatter of wooden tubs, no laughter from behind bathhouse curtains, no familiar, vaguely herby scent of boiling water and ambition. The tubs are gone, and no one wants to talk about it. This is the age of forgetting how to bathe, when once bustling bathhouses shutter their doors, tubs gather dust in storage sheds, and soap becomes something you associate with old poetry or monks with eccentric skin conditions. You walk through what used to be a public bath. The door is half-rotted, hanging off its hinges. Inside, a rat scurries across the cracked floor tiles. A vine has taken up residence in a corner tub. The only thing left behind is a small rusted ladle. You pick it up. It smells like nothing. The silence is haunting and oddly familiar, because this wasn't a single event. It wasn't like one day Europe collectively stood up and said, "Right, that's it, no more bathing." It was slower, quieter, a shift in attitude that crept in over decades, unwashed and unannounced. It started with fear. Remember the plague? Of course you do. Your pruned fingers still ache from the vinegar soak. In the centuries that followed, the idea took hold that water, especially hot water, opened the pores and made the body more vulnerable. Pores were portals. Disease flew in on foul air, and a fresh bath made you into an inviting little sponge for sickness. So bathing became suspicious. Medical texts began to advise against it. Bathe rarely, one 16th century French physician warned, and only when necessary, like after battle or childbirth. Otherwise, a brisk rub down with a dry cloth would do just fine. You glance at your sleeves. They're not doing fine. As towns modernized, public bathhouses were increasingly linked to immorality. Brothels had used them. Lovers had used them. So now, in a pious backlash, they were closed down, not always by force, but by neglect. Some city councils even banned them outright. Why? Well, aside from disease paranoia and religious purity, there was this growing belief that the body was best left alone, that excessive washing weakened you, that soap was for the vain, that cleanliness smelled dangerously close to pleasure. So people began to wash less. Not everyone, of course. The rich still had perfumed cloths and the occasional hot basin brought by a servant. But for the commoner, a full bath became something you might only do once or twice a year, if that. And Europe, quite literally, grew crusty. There are stories, plenty of them, of nobles hiding their body odor with perfume, of undergarments changed daily to absorb filth, of linen as soap, essentially. You'd wear a clean shirt under your doublet, and once it was dirty, congratulations, you're clean now, because the shirt took the dirt for you. You can't decide if it's genius or denial. Probably both. Historians still argue about the extent of this bathless period. Some suggest it was exaggerated in later centuries to make the Enlightenment look cleaner by comparison. Others point to city records, health manuals, and personal letters that imply hygiene habits really did decline dramatically. Regardless, the perception stuck. The Middle Ages got branded as dirty. And while that's not entirely fair, remember the traveling tub, the herbs, the love of a good vinegar foot soak? There was a period when tubs gathered dust, when washing was a memory, not a habit, when towns forgot that water could be healing. You step out of the abandoned bathhouse and into a street full of people doing their best, covering smell with herbs, washing hands in wine, hanging rosemary by the door. Trying, adapting. You can't really blame them. After all, they didn't forget how to bathe because they were lazy. They forgot because fear rewrote the rules. Tomorrow, you'll begin the climb back, the slow, uneven rediscovery of the bath. From royal court trends to the return of the private tub, we'll see how bathing became desirable again. One royal bottom at a time. Your feet sink into velvet. The air smells of roses, warm milk, and powdered diplomacy. Somewhere in the next room, a harpist is plucking out a tune that sounds like someone trying not to disturb a sleeping dog. Everything glows. Even the candles seem expensive. You're in a palace. More importantly, you're in a royal bathroom, or what passes for one in this century. And the tub before you, it's big, deep, lined with silk cushions and surrounded by 3 servants who all pretend they're not looking at your knees. Welcome to the return of the noble bath. It's been a while, hasn't it? After years, maybe centuries of fearful avoidance, the wealthy have rediscovered something radical. Bathing is actually enjoyable. Scandalous, I know. You step into the tub, slowly, carefully. Because the water is hot, the surface is slippery, and the eyes of history are upon you. The bath water has been infused with rose petals, warmed goat's milk, and about 6 different herbs, whose names you've only ever seen embroidered on pillows. A servant hands you a sponge carved from coral. Another offers you a small porcelain bowl filled with crushed almonds and honey. You're supposed to rub it into your skin to invigorate the blood. It smells like dessert and ambition. You relax. A little too much. Because here, in the polished chambers of European courts, bathing has returned. But only for the elite. You see, by the 16th and 17th centuries, something curious happened. The fear of water didn't entirely go away, but it got rebranded. Now, private baths were acceptable again, provided they were done discreetly, under supervision with the proper oils and in a setting that looked more like a royal theatre than a scrub station. And always indoors. Public bathhouses, still mostly gone or condemned. But private baths, they were in fashion, especially in France. Take King Louis XIV, the Sun King himself, he of the wigs, the mirrors, and the general sense of being followed by trumpets. He famously hated full baths, preferred dry rubs with perfumed cloths, but he also commissioned some of the most elaborate bathing chambers in Europe. Why? Because baths were now about display. You didn't need to wash everything. You just needed to be seen preparing to. Perfume, powder, oils, scented gloves, medicated waters, silk towels. Cleanliness had become a performance. And you? You were the star. You run a finger along the edge of the tub. It's lined in silver, probably pure, probably worth more than an entire street of peasants. One servant whispers that the queen prefers her bath to be warmed to blood temperature. Another murmurs about a noble who bathed in mare's milk to soften her skin. You nod solemnly, as if that makes sense and doesn't sound like a dairy nightmare. And you realize, bathing has returned, yes, but it has returned selectively. The poor still make do with washcloths, river dips, or borrowed buckets. But here, the body is once again a canvas, and a tub is its stage. Some historians say this shift wasn't just about hygiene, it was about control. The more a noble person could command their environment, heat the water just right, choose the oils, summon the cloth, the more powerful they appeared. Cleanliness became class. You recline a little further. A servant brings you a small tray of candied fruit. Another refreshes the rose water with a look of absolute reverence. You begin to understand why someone would marry into royalty just for the bath. It's not just about being clean, it's about being pampered. But here's the twist. While noble baths were making a scented comeback, science was starting to stir in the background. Quietly, uncertainly. The Enlightenment was on the horizon, and with it, new ideas about the body, the skin, and why we should actually wash more often. You close your eyes. Let the water lull you. Tomorrow, you'll leave the palace and step into the world of early modern health reformers. The ones who thought maybe, just maybe, regular people deserve to be clean too. And they brought with them not perfumes or pearls, but plumbing. You hear it before you see it. A steady drip, Not the alarming kind, more like a confident, civilized plunk, the sound of water going exactly where it's supposed to. No leaks, no muddy puddles, no panicked villagers yelling, "Fetch the bucket." Just precision. You round the corner and there it is, a faucet, a real one, attached to a pipe, delivering running water right into a clean stone basin without the help of servants, donkeys, or divine intervention. Welcome to the age of plumbing. Well, early plumbing. You're in a moderately progressive 18th century town now, where forward-thinking minds have decided that maybe, just maybe, water shouldn't require a hike, a fire, and 3 prayers to St. Agnes to get it warm. Instead, it can be piped, directed, controlled. And with that, a new kind of bathing begins. You enter a modest house, not noble, not peasant, but somewhere in between. A merchant's home, maybe. There's a copper tub in the corner. It's not ornate. It's practical, clean. A bar of soap sits beside it. No longer a rare luxury, but a product you can buy at market. The soap smells like lavender and economics. A woman of about 50 welcomes you. She's proud of the tub. Tells you how her husband installed the pipes himself, with much grunting and only 3 minor floods. She explains how they can now bathe once a week without hauling buckets from the river. "Wednesdays," she says. "We wash on Wednesdays." It sounds like a holiday. This is the beginning of something big. Because in the 1700s, as Enlightenment thinking trickled into towns, people started questioning everything. Disease wasn't just divine punishment anymore. It might be connected to filth. Contagion theory was whispering its first ideas, and water, for all its risks, was being eyed again as a possible friend. Public health advocates started to appear. Doctors began recommending regular baths, not just for aristocrats, but for everyone. Town councils started investing in water systems. School teachers began instructing children to wash their hands, occasionally with actual soap. Imagine. Of course, not everyone agreed. Many still feared water. A few influential thinkers claimed that too much bathing could weaken the body, especially for women, whose fragile constitutions were apparently no match for warm water and basic hygiene. You look at the woman filling her tub and try not to laugh. She looks like she could take out a chimney with her bare hands. She hands you a small towel. It's rough, but clean. You kneel beside the tub and wash your face. The water's still lukewarm, but it comes from a pipe. A small miracle, centuries in the making. Bathing is becoming a habit again, not just for ritual, not just for healing, but for maintenance. And with it comes new infrastructure. Indoor tubs, private washrooms, drainage systems that don't dump everything back into the street. It's not perfect, but it's progress. Historians still debate how widespread these improvements were. Many rural areas lagged behind. Some cities innovated, while others stubbornly clung to their filth. But the idea was spreading. Being clean wasn't just a privilege. It was a possibility. You step outside again. The street smells of horses, baked bread, and, faintly, soap. You see a boy chasing a cart. He falls, scrapes his knee, and his mother pulls him up, scolding him gently while wiping the cut with a damp cloth. Not wine, not spit, just clean water. You smile, because tomorrow you'll visit a place where bathing reaches its next evolution. Public bathhouses return, but this time they come back with marble columns, ticket prices, and an oddly strong scent of eucalyptus. You push open the doors and are hit with a wall of steam. But this isn't the sweaty, cramped haze of a medieval sweat cure or the sour-scented panic of a plague bath. No, this steam is intentional. refined. It smells faintly of eucalyptus and civilization, and beneath it, laughter echoes. Slippers shuffle. Water flows. Welcome to the new old world of the public bathhouse. Not the medieval kind where gossip and smallpox mingled freely. This is something different. Modern, gleaming, resurrected, but with better plumbing and fewer rats. You're standing in a 19th century European bathhouse, perhaps in London or Paris or Budapest. Cities where public health officials, architects, and wealthy philanthropists finally agreed on one thing. Clean citizens make cleaner cities. The bathhouse before you has separate entrances for men and women, high ceilings, a mosaic floor, marble benches so smooth you slide on them even when dry, and rows of changing rooms with hooks for hats, canes, corsets, and class distinctions. You're given a towel, a real one, fluffy, possibly washed in hot water. You're still not over the luxury of laundering. Someone points you toward the hot pool, then the cold one, then the plunge. You wonder if people actually enjoy the plunge, or if it's just peer pressure with water. The room is a quiet hum of voices and splashing. You hear English, German, Hungarian, maybe a little Greek. Steam erases borders. Everyone becomes pink and pruny in the same universal way. You lower yourself into a warm bath, and you realize something. Bathing is back, and this time, it's public and proud. In the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution brought more than smoke and railways. It brought density. Cities swelled, apartments shrank. Access to private tubs became rare again. So civic-minded reformers pushed for a solution: build places where people could clean themselves affordably and with dignity. And it worked. Bathhouses spread across Europe. In Britain, they were called public baths and wash houses. In France, they leaned Roman with les bains publics. In Germany and Central Europe, the thermal bath tradition bloomed into great social complexes with saunas, steam chambers, and pools big enough to get lost in. Some were lavish, funded by wealthy benefactors. Others were practical, backed by city councils with a moral mission and a spreadsheet. You move to the cold bath. It's regrettable. You last 10 seconds, but the shock wakes you up. You notice signs along the wall. No shouting, no running. Soap provided. Modesty required. There's something deeply democratic about this place. For a small fee, or none in some cities, you could bathe next to a banker or a butcher. Everyone was reduced to towel-clad equality. Cleanliness wasn't just a luxury now, it was a right. Children were brought here weekly. Workers came after shifts. Some even had lessons, classes in how to wash properly. Yes, really. Because after centuries of suspicion and improvisation, bathing needed to be taught again. The bathhouse attendant walks by. He carries a wooden bucket, not to fetch water, but to toss it cheerfully at an unsuspecting man in the sauna. The man yelps. Everyone laughs. You grin. This feels more like a club than a clinic. But it wasn't all fun and foot soaks. In many cities, public bathhouses became battlegrounds for hygiene politics. Some critics worried about moral decay. Too many naked elbows, perhaps. Others complained of lower classes invading spaces meant for refinement. And let's not forget the ever-present Victorian fear of pleasure. So rules multiplied. Genders were separated. Hours were regulated. Bathhouse behavior manuals were written that could rival small novels in length and passive-aggressive tone. Still, people came. And bathing, once lost to superstition and disease, was fully reborn. Historians often cite this moment as the beginning of modern hygiene culture, when washing became habitual, expected, a sign of respectability. And for the first time in centuries, it no longer mattered how rich you were. You could be clean too. You step out of the water, towel off, and sit by a window where condensation blurs the world outside. The bath has made you sleepy, not just because it's warm, but because, for once, you're not bathing out of fear. You're bathing because you can. Tomorrow we'll slip into the rise of the private bathroom. When tubs came home, soap went corporate, and cleanliness officially became next to godliness, or at least next to middle-class furniture. The tub is inside the house. Take a moment to appreciate that. Not in the yard, not hauled in by servants, not filled by a procession of sad wooden buckets and a donkey named Maurice. No, this tub has its own room, with a door and towels, and a small window that lets in just enough polite sunlight. You have officially arrived in the era of the private bathroom. It smells like soap and ambition. The year is sometime in the late 19th or early 20th century. You're in a respectable, upwardly mobile household. Middle class, but with aspirations. There's a rug in the hallway, a bookshelf filled with novels, a portrait of someone's grandmother who looks like she's about to scold you. But most importantly, there's plumbing, real working pipes, cold water, hot water on good days, a tap you can turn, a drain you can trust. The tub is porcelain, claw-footed and completely yours. No strangers, no waiting, no questionable bath pebbles from the previous user. You turn the tap, watch the water rush in, and feel like royalty. But this isn't just comfort, it's cultural revolution. Because now, for the first time in history, bathing isn't just a public ritual or an occasional indulgence. It's a private routine. Something done quietly, regularly, without fanfare. The bath becomes part of your daily life, like tea or mail, or pretending to understand your electric bill. You step in, the water is warm, scented with a soap labeled rose verbena, and packaged with a kind of marketing poetry that suggests it will renew your soul and possibly help you speak French. You lather, you soak, you sigh. And as you do, you think about how corporations have started to move in. This isn't necessarily bad, unless you're allergic to lemongrass. But it does mean that bathing is no longer just a tradition or a response to disease. It's a business. Soap is mass-produced now, available in stores, with logos, with jingles, with rival brands boasting about lather quality and scientific freshness. Toothpaste joins the party. Deodorant enters the chat. Suddenly, your bathroom shelf becomes a battlefield of product loyalty and armpit anxiety. Cleanliness is no longer about just not being dirty. It's about being desirably clean. You read an ad in the corner of a newspaper. It tells you that people will respect you more if you use a particular brand of soap. That cleanliness shows character. That it's not just your body you're washing, it's your reputation. No pressure, of course. Public health movements support all of this. Cities install more water lines. Sanitation improves. Schools teach hygiene. Doctors emphasize hand washing. Governments launch campaigns with posters of stern nurses telling children to scrub behind their ears or risk social ruin. Historians call this the rise of the hygiene movement, an intersection of science, marketing, morality, and indoor plumbing. Not everyone joins in right away. Some rural areas still lack access to running water. Some people distrust the rapid change. But the tide is turning. Slowly, cleanliness becomes normative, expected, a sign that you're modern, respectable, safe. You pull the plug, watch the water spiral down, carrying away the soap suds and, hopefully, the lingering specter of medieval bathwater filled with herbs and sorrow. You dry off with a towel that isn't made of burlap. You brush your hair in front of a small mirror. You look surprisingly fresh, and you realize bathing is no longer a story you tell once a year. It's something you do, something that defines your day. Tomorrow's in the final section. You'll come full circle into the hyper-hygienic world of today, where we bathe more than ever, obsess over scent, and still manage to feel weirdly unclean. You'll discover what the medieval world might think of our rituals, and whether we've scrubbed too far. Your bathroom smells like 17 kinds of citrus. You stand in front of a mirror that adjusts its brightness. Your soap is labeled volcanic detox. Your shampoo claims to contain sea kelp and marine minerals, despite the fact that you live nowhere near an ocean. There's a drawer of carefully folded towels, each fluffier than a medieval duke's entire bed. You are impossibly clean. But are you? This is the world of modern bathing, hyper-sanitary, hyper-fragranced, and oddly insecure. You step into your shower, not a bath this time. No one has time to soak anymore. And the water obeys you. Hot, perfect pressure, no rats in the drain, no shared buckets with strangers named Godfrey. It's glorious. And also kind of weird. Because somewhere between plague-era vinegar rub-downs and royal rosewater rituals, we've arrived at a point where bathing is constant, expected, marketed, monetized. We shower daily, sometimes twice. We exfoliate, we moisturize, we serum. We label body wash as energizing or soul healing. We're obsessed with cleanliness, and we're still nervous about it. You rub a loofah over your arm and wonder if you're using it too much. You read conflicting advice online. Don't scrub too hard. You'll damage your microbiome. Actually, scrub harder. Dead skin is bad. Use soap, but only if it's artisanal and made by monks in a mountain. It's exhausting. Historians have noticed something funny about all this. After millennia of struggling to even access water, we now have more access than ever, and somehow still feel uncertain. Because modern bathing isn't just about removing dirt, it's about performing health. We're told to look dewy, smell like fresh linen, never have dandruff, dry skin, or, heaven forbid, visible pores. We curate ourselves, not unlike nobles did with rose-scented cloths and scented gloves. But now, instead of servants, we have influencers. We haven't stopped using exotic ingredients. We've just renamed them. Clay masks from Morocco, bath bombs with Himalayan salt, serums with gold flakes and charcoal from volcanoes we have never heard of. We still love the story of the bath, even if we've lost some of the meaning. Because once, bathing was rare, it was sacred, it was communal. It was an act of preparation for weddings, funerals, healing, or seasonal changes. It marked time. It meant something. Now it's often just another checkbox, another part of your morning rush. Quick rinse, shampoo, maybe a scroll through your phone while conditioner sets. But sometimes, when you run a proper bath, light a candle, pick out a ridiculous bath bomb shaped like a galaxy. You catch something ancient. You sit back. You sigh. And for a few fleeting minutes, you reconnect with a long, messy, aromatic history that brought you here. You remember the Roman pools echoing with gossip, the medieval tub in a kitchen filled with rosewater and sheep's complaints, the sweat cures, the vinegar rubs, the noblewoman demanding milk warmed to exactly tepid and no more, the rusted ladle in an abandoned bathhouse, the first pipe in the merchant's wall, the public baths buzzing with laughter and damp towels, the private tub with floral soap and an eager marketing department. Bathing has always been more than washing. It's memory, it's ritual, it's vulnerability, and it's something every human, across every era, has approached with a strange mix of hope, vanity, superstition, and suds. You pull the plug on your modern bath. Wrap yourself in a towel soft enough to shame a medieval tapestry. And as you step back into your regular life, you carry the quiet knowledge that the simple act of bathing connects you to everyone who ever tried to be clean in a very messy world. Now close your eyes. Feel the warmth fade from your skin. Let the steam rise and dissolve into the dark. Tomorrow can wait. End of script. Sweet dreams.